Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Welcome to another edition of GTF Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and it is good to be back here in the saddle after taking a few days off to attend our barroom show host and barflies party over at King's Entertainment in Rosemont. We had a fantastic time. There are only two things that would have made the weekend better is if Greg Gabriel could have made it to our show, and of course, if the Bears would have pulled out that win. But nonetheless, it is good to be back here, and it is good to talk football with my man, Greg Gabriel. How are you, brother?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing good, Greg. And I got to tell you, one of the highlights of this weekend, and I had a fabulous weekend, but the game is over. I'm walking out of the stadium, and a lovely lady with beautiful blue eyes, very, very attractive lady says, "Hey, is your name Aldo?" And I go, "Yes, I am." "You do a podcast with Greg Gabriel?" And I go, "Yes." And she goes, "I love your show. Please tell Greg that I love your show." I listen to all sorts of podcasts, and I stopped listening to them because it's always middle-aged men whining about the Bears. You guys don't whine. So clearly she doesn't listen to me. She listens to you.
No, I've helped walk you through that.
Yes, you have. You've taught me a lot. So before we start talking about the Chicago Bears, I need to get your thoughts on what has happened over at with the Indianapolis Colts. Your good friend Greg Ballard had to fire
Chris Ballard. Don't call him Greg. I'm Greg.
Jeez. That I'm hitting 90% on that, calling him Greg Ballard. I don't know why I do that, but anyway, Chris Ballard had to fire his head coach. Your thoughts on what's going on over at Indianapolis with the Colts?
Well, I got a lot of thoughts. First of all, I have not spoken to Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I have exchanged quite a few text messages. Yesterday, and I'm, it wouldn't be right for me to say exactly. There's one thing I'll read verbatim, but wouldn't be right for me to say exactly what went on back and forth, but it, because it should be kept private. But at the same time, I don't know if it was all Chris that, and he didn't tell me, that pushed Frank out the door. I know Chris was very close to Frank. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Felt highly of him as a person and as a coach. He did say, I said, "I feel for you, brother. That had to be tough." And he said, "It's the hardest thing I ever done in his whole life." So, but I you know what? Something had to be done. Now, and they both got extensions not too long ago.
Right.
Chris's I think goes through 2026. But you can't believe everything you read, but some of the Indianapolis writers are saying that Wright may have lost the locker room. I don't know if that's true, and I'm not going to ask. Like I said, there's certain things that you when you're talking to friends, texting with friends or whatever, there's certain things when to ask or how to ask.
Sure.
And there's others you just leave it alone for another day.
Right.
Because there's a lot of personal feelings involved with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And, I've been in the building when people have gotten fired, people that are close to me, Ron Rivera, Harry Hiestand, it's not fun. It's like a knife going through you.
Yeah.
And so all that being said, I think something had to be done. There's all the speculation that Chris is going to get fired. He's not going to get fired. That's not happening.
That's good to hear.
We'll put it this way. It'd be a shock to him and a shock to a lot of people if he was. And he'd be on about a 4-year paid vacation. I wouldn't mind that.
Really?
But he knows he has to get it right. And here's the problem he had. And it's nobody's fault. Go back to summer of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So going into the 2019 season, he's 3 weeks into training camp and his quarterback retires.
Unbelievable.
Who's not only just a good quarterback, he's one of the premier quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And now at that point, where are you going to get a quarterback in the middle of August besides nowhere? And you know what's funny is I spent 2 days at the Colts camp because I was working for the XFL. So I had to go to about 5 different training camps. Mm-hmm. And we had we were a good communist society in the XFL. We had to share our information with the with the other teams because, there just wasn't enough people to go around. So I went to Chicago's camp, Indianapolis camp, went to the, at that time, the Redskins camp, and a few other, Philadelphia, New York Giants. And, we had to share our information with the other teams. But anyway, Frank was not practicing when I was there. And at the time, or not Frank, Luck,
Andrew Luck.
And Andrew Luck was not practicing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought it was, a couple of days off and he'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a couple of days off and he retired, and then it was like, they had a feeling within the building that they were in their window to compete. So it was, we need an established quarterback. We don't want to go out and get a young guy and wait. And so they go with Jacoby Brissett that year, and then they bring in Phillip Rivers.
Right.
And Rivers actually played pretty good.
Did.
But he knew that he was, that was it. It was a one and done deal. Then they went and got Wentz, which turned out bad. But they went, and maybe this has something to do with what happened yesterday. They went with Wentz on Frank's feeling. Frank had coached Wentz in Philadelphia. And, he was the quarterback coach and had worked with him for a few years. So he's the guy who thought it could work. Well, reality is, and I did not get this from Ballard. I've gotten from other people that have worked with Wentz. And that is, he's very difficult to coach. He's very stubborn. And he's not a leader. Well, how are you supposed to win with that?
How about that?
And then, last year at the end of the season, Jimmy Irsay, the owner, didn't want him. I mean, he came flat out said it. Right. He's out of here. So he couldn't get him out the door fast enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hindsight being 2020, maybe they should have, because they built a win now team. That team was ready to win. They were just missing the quarterback. And hindsight being 2020, maybe they should have traded some of those assets to maybe move up in the draft and develop a quarterback and just restart. It's always a difficult decision, but Ballard has been really forthright with the media in Indianapolis, talking about how difficult and challenging it is to acquire a quality quarterback. And he wasn't going to pick anyone in the draft that was just going to be a Band-Aid or just to placate fans and media and so forth. He was going to pick the best player that was a value.
I lost you there, Aldo.
I'm back.
What happened? I lost you for a minute.
I've got a new trackpad and it's very, very sensitive. I'll put it on I'll put my finger on it and all of a sudden things happen. So I got to readjust the trackpad.
Okay. Well, no, you're right about that. And they tried to react to the situation as it pertained to the roster, and it didn't work out that way. Not the first time that's going to happen to somebody in the NFL, and it's sure as hell not going to be the last time. That stuff happens. I will share one thing that Chris said in a text here. I told him, I felt bad because of all the heat he's taken and stuff.
Sure.
And I said, what really makes me feel bad is that I know you can handle it because that, comes with the territory.
Right.
It's your family has to put up with it. He's got kids in high school in Indianapolis. His oldest son is a pretty damn good quarterback and pitcher. And one of the Indianapolis suburban schools. But anyway, he said, my family handles it well. So do I. He says, I only care about, now this is important. He says, I only care about what's going on internally. I can't control the outside world. So in other words, he just flushes it. And there was other stuff he said, but I just, I want to leave it as it is. But he knows he has to get a young quarterback. So I would think that this offseason that he's going to have to either lucky enough to be sitting in a position where he can draft one, or he's going to have to move up to get one, depending on what their final record is. And there's some potentially good ones in this draft. It's closer to the Justin Fields draft than last year's draft, as far as quality of the talent. So, but he's going to be around there for a while. And if he gets a young quarterback and the guy starts to develop, then, that could change everything for him, so to speak, and turn the franchise around. But it also, in most cases, it didn't happen with Ryan Pace, but in most cases, when you draft a quarterback real high, it buys you some time.
Right. Well, good luck to Chris. By all accounts, he's a very good man, and so we wish him nothing but the best here at the Bar Room. All right, let's get to the topic of the Chicago Bears, an extraordinary game against the Miami Dolphins. One thing is clear is that Justin Fields is no longer a question mark. It is now the only question remaining about Justin Fields is when is he going? How high is the ceiling for him is probably the topic to discuss. What were your thoughts about his play in particular? And then we'll get into all of the other, issues regarding the game, because there's plenty of them. But I'd love to hear your thoughts first on Justin Fields' development.
Well, number one, I agree with you. He is growing. The last 3 weeks has been the best 3 weeks that he's put together, like back to back to back, since he's been a pro. Part of that is, now let's back up a little bit. This is in 3 years. And actually, Trent Green, I think, was the analyst on Sunday, and he mentioned it. This is the third offense he's been in 3 years. He's at the Ohio State, and actually the fourth or the third in 4 years total, or fifth and no, wait, how is it? He was at Georgia. Georgia's offense for a year. Then he's at Ohio State for 2 years in another offense. So that's 2. Then he's at Nagy's offense for his rookie year. Now he's in another offense. Now, I don't give a damn who you are. That's hard to do.
Yes, indeed.
So, and he played, we could put on the tape that his play at Ohio State, especially that second year at Ohio State, was just fantastic. I mean, his touchdown to interception ratio was great. Totally outplayed Trevor Lawrence in the college playoff game. Even after he, almost broke his ribs on that one hit that everybody remembers. But where you thought he could be a good drop back passer in the NFL level, that has not come to fruition yet. He's more of a improvised type guy who makes plays with his feet, extends plays with his feet, plays better with a half field, even though he's getting better with the whole field, doing the reads. But it gets down to learning the scheme, understanding the scheme, but it's not just him. His receivers got to be on the same page with him. And we've talked about this before. There's so many adjustments, slight adjustments that you got to make depending on what the defense is doing, that to get everybody on the same page, it's not going to happen in 6 weeks of training camp and a couple, it might take the full season. But we've seen in the last 3 weeks that it's getting better, and it should continue to get better. Now, does that mean he could have a bad game and throw 3 picks 2 weeks down the road? Sure, that could happen. I mean, that happens to everybody. But you got to look at the arrow pointing up. And what I hate seeing, you love Twitter, but I hate seeing some of the comments on Twitter is that people only want to give players, like, they make a mistake in one game and they want to cut them. Mm-hmm. And that's not how you evaluate a player, especially a young player. You got to look at the whole season from beginning to end. And it's not just how he performs on the field and on game day. It's what's he doing in practice? What's he doing in the classroom? What's he doing in the weight room? How's he living his life? There's all sorts of different portions of his life that you want to evaluate. And you're always looking for the arrow going up. In other words, he's climbing the steps. Right. And there's going to be a time when he's going to climb the steps and he's going to hit a plateau. And at that point, does he stay there or does he start climbing the steps again? Mm-hmm. And if he stays there, then he's reached the ceiling.
There you go.
Okay. And if he starts climbing, then that there's still more to get, or they go the other way, start going backwards. Yeah. And then it's time to get rid of those guys. So, and it's difficult to see. And from us who are on the outside looking in, it's really easy to say, oh, you got to cut this guy. Like, I've read this stuff like Bayless Jones isn't going to see the field the rest of the season. How much you want to bet? I'll make that bet every day of the week that he's going to probably be active this week. It's they got a 3rd round pick invested in him. It's similar to the Tevin Jenkins thing, but I think with Tevin it was more maturity. He's a rookie and he has to feel comfortable. He's pressing right now because he's made some mistakes. He had 2 muff punts, a drop pass. Do you think he's happy with that?
Hell no.
That's eating him up inside. So now he's got to get confidence. Right. And we said the same thing about Justin Fields. He's got to come out and have some confidence at the beginning of a game. Mm-hmm. And then that'll translate to bigger plays at the end of the game. And that's exactly what has happened with him. So I think with Bayless, they're not going to give up on Bayless. I think as a whole, and I wrote about this this morning. I don't know if they put it up yet for Windy City Gridiron, about the overall look at the rookie class. I think this is a hell of a rookie class. When you get that many rookies as they have this year, and without a 1st round pick that are contributing and or starting as rookies, that's incredible.
It is amazing, yes.
Okay, so now, I checked right before we came on. I checked the roster. How about this? Between the regular roster, the 53, the practice squad, and an injured reserve, the center, there's one guy in injured reserve. There's 23 rookies on this team.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that much.
I mean, that includes the practice squad. And I've never seen that many on a team. And I've been doing this a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, people say, okay, we got to go into we got to fix the offensive line and the defensive line in the offseason. I'm not so sure you got to fix the offensive line. Maybe one position. And I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, in the evaluation process, they're going to go game 1 to game 17.
Mm-hmm.
Not game 1 to game 8 or game 9, whatever game we just played. And it's, what's going on? Patrick was signed to a contract to be the starting center. He's played, a quarter at center?
Right.
A guy's been very durable throughout his career, and he's just hit a bit of bad luck here. I think when he's ready to come off IR, he'll go back to the starting center position. And Tony the Pod Boss just puts Riley Reif's been very solid. He has been. And I think that's the only position where you could see change next year is at that right tackle position. They got to make a decision. Riley Reif's going to be 33 next year, I think. I think he's 32 now. And do you bring him back? Do you let Larry Borum? Is Larry Borum good enough, or is Larry Borum a backup?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or do we got to go out and get one? And that'll be one of the off-season situations that are discussed. So then it's on to, okay, do we do it in free agency or do we draft one?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, looking at how Ryan Poles spends money, he's not going to go out. He's not going to overspend for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He showed you that in the offseason with the wide receiver market. When the guy from Arizona gets all that money from Jacksonville, which was totally out of line and screwed up the wide receiver market totally, he didn't follow suit. He stayed with the cards he had, which is what the right thing to do was. It's just the whole thing's going to be interesting because you've got other guys like in the offensive line. You got Carter and the kid from San Diego State, Zach Thomas. These guys got a chance to be decent players. They are, and I'll go back to, and I've mentioned this on the show before, and I wrote about it in Windy City this morning. I had a conversation with the great Marv Levy, Hall of Fame coach. This was in the Atlanta airport years and years ago, because I was living in Buffalo when I worked for the Giants. And so we were on our way back from the Senior Bowl. We had a layover in Atlanta. You took a flight from Mobile to Atlanta, then Atlanta to Buffalo. So we're sitting, the plane's delayed on our flight from Atlanta to Buffalo. So, Marv and I are talking, and great guy, by the way, just a superb guy who lives downtown Chicago. And, we got talking about the draft and rookies and stuff. And he said, Greg, you got to let rookies be rookies.
Yes.
He said, I expect nothing out of a rookie. If I get something out of a rookie, it's a bonus. Mm-hmm. He said, what I expect is for them to contribute in year 2.
There you go.
And so that being said, then it's, what's going to happen to these guys, to Zach, to Jay Tyree, all these people. What are they going to do? And then there's Leatherwood who comes into the equation too. Are these guys worthy players to be starters? And when you're going to get the answer. You're going to get the answer next summer in training camp, unless they go out and sign somebody. And I can see him signing a right tackle, maybe. And that's if they say, I'm not going to pay Reif any more money. He's 33 years old.
He's going to be 34 in December, by the way.
Okay, 34 years old. So I'm not going to pay him any money because that's Band-Aid. And you want to, when you're building a roster, you want to do it in such a way that you can continue to grow. Well, by trying to sign Riley Reif you're really hurting the growth of a young player.
Right.
Or if you can get a 28, 29-year-old vet who is out there that may be a better fit, and you can get it at a reasonable price. If you can get them for the money that you got Reef for, throw out, Reef's contract was $3 million plus incentives.
Right.
So, say that the incentives were the regular price. So you got, 12, 13, 14, $15 million. You can get a real viable right tackle. Then yeah, go ahead and do it. Unless you think one of your guys, young guys, after coaching them for a year, even though they're on the practice squad or whatever, unless you think, you know what, that guy's the answer. I've seen him all year in practice. I know what he can do. So let's go with him. Somebody mentioned Leatherwood. I do not think Leatherwood's a tackle. I think he's a guard. He failed miserably. Now, I could be wrong, but he failed miserably at right tackle with the Raiders. And part of it, I think, is he's never played. There's some people that get stuck or have to play one position, and he has played on the left side his whole career in college at Alabama.
Right. And
then he comes into the pros and he's on the right side. He's doing everything different. He didn't adapt to it well. So I think if you put him at left tackle or left guard, he's going to be fine. But I'm not moving Jones out of that left tackle position. I don't think Jones is going to be good. I think Jones is going to be real good.
I love it.
And he gets better every week. Of course, some guys are, taking him to task every once in a while, some of the better pass rushers. But you know what? He's faced some pretty good guys the last couple of weeks and more than held his own. Mm-hmm. And did Chubb get a sack the other day? Granted, it's his first week with Miami, but rushing the passer is rushing the passer.
Yep.
On third and long. And if I'm correct, they only gave up one sack, I think, on Sunday.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And when he plays against Parsons the week before, he did pretty damn good against that guy. So the arrow is definitely going up with him. That guy was a steal. And I'll keep going back to why. It's because he played at a low, FCS level school, and he didn't have great coaching. People didn't know exactly what they were buying, so they were leery. So you get them talent-wise. You should have gone in the third round, but because of all the circumstances, he goes in the fifth.
Mm-hmm. One of the things about Matt Eberflus's press conference yesterday that I wanted to share.
I did not hear that. I wanted to do it last night, and I couldn't because we had some stuff going on.
He didn't have a lot of new things to say in comparison to what he said Sunday after the game. But I pulled a couple of things out, and this one really I thought was special because we always talk about, boy, are they holding these guys accountable? And so Flus shared the process for addressing player performance at Hallis Hall.
And the guys are always good in those meetings. Some of those are hard conversations. When guys don't perform well at certain positions, which is the case every week. There's certain positions or a certain guy doesn't do as well as he'd like to have. It's a hard day for him. He's got to go back and look at it, and he's got to say, hey, this is where it is. I have to get better. It doesn't matter if that's quarterback, if it's offensive line, receiver, corner, linebacker, whatever that is. You have to look at it and look at it with a critical eye and say, hey, how can I improve? And I was appealing to the team today is that we have to have, when we come in here as a team and say, hey, who had a B plus or better performance, we have to have more hands raised up. And when we do that collectively as a team, then we're playing complementary football together, offense, defense, and kicking at the same time.
I love that process, and I love the transparency and honesty of Matt Eberflus in addressing that, because fans are always saying, well, why don't they do something? They are doing something. They're talking about it.
Let me tell you something. I've sat in those Monday meetings.
Uh-huh.
They aren't fun, especially when you lost.
Yeah.
And it depends on who your position coach is, whether you get ripped or you get taught or whatever. But you got to look in the mirror every Monday. You got to take a close look in the mirror and find out exactly what you're seeing, and you've got to be accountable to yourself. Not only do you got to be accountable to the coaches and to the franchise, you got to be accountable to yourself. You got to be fair to yourself and say, hey, I screwed up here, and this is where I got to get better. Like EQ has that drop on that play. He should never have dropped that ball. Okay, but he did. Okay, then you can get into the two interference calls on the Bears, which I thought were atrocious, and then the non-call on Claypool, which was even worse. I mean, he was literally getting looked like they were doing a Heimlich maneuver with him or something,
Exactly, or something X-rated.
Yeah, so I like that X-rated one. They didn't call it, so. But there's nothing you can do about it. I tweeted out during the game, you're going to get a letter from the league on Wednesday saying, we made a mistake. That should have been a call. Big fucking deal. Doesn't change the outcome of the game. And I tweeted this too. It didn't mean the Bears were going to win the game. It would have given them the opportunity to, at worst, tie the game up. That's at the 21-yard line.
Yep.
With still a lot of time to go.
Yep.
So maybe they score and win. At worst, they kick a field goal, got an opportunity to kick a field goal, and go into overtime. And then, but it took away the opportunity for them to win the game, and that's what's too bad about it, and that's what's deflating to the players. As much as you want to criticize the defense for how poorly they played most of that game, in the fourth quarter, they stepped up and played.
Yeah.
When they made stops when they had to make stops. So you got to look at that too as part of the evaluation process when you're reviewing a game.
Yeah, and getting back to this call, the field judge, number 25, Ryan Dixon, this year he has been calling, according to Pro Football Reference, he's been calling more penalties on home teams than on visiting teams. And he called 3 penalties in Sunday's game. One was a pass interference on Keon Chasen, who pass interfered against Chase Claypool early in the game. And then he followed that up with the pass interference call on Kendall Vildor, which was a legit call. We saw that replay earlier. And then the Eddie Jackson call, which was not pass interference, in my opinion. And then this non-call, I think this Ryan Dixon needs to be evaluated by the NFL.
Well, they do. They do, Aldo. They get graded on every game, just like the players do. The only thing I think fans would like to see it public.
Yes.
That's never going to happen. But those guys make a lot of money now, and it's a part-time job for them.
I know, that's what bugs me about it.
I mean, some of them make hundreds of, $400,000, $500,000 a year for reffing games 17 weeks a year.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look, most of these guys have pretty damn good jobs to begin with.
Yeah, bank managers, professors at university, financial advisors. Yeah, they
attorneys. There's several attorneys.
Yes. Eberflus was asked about that and whether they were going to turn it in. Here's a short response he had.
We do. Every single week we turn in certain things that we think are good calls. A lot of times we turn in, because there's obviously a lot of good calls that people don't talk about, and the referees do a good job with that. And again, sometimes we say, hey, these are the ones that we disagree with. And then we get feedback from them and try to learn.
King Pookie Nation in the chat room said that I think it was Chris Watts said that you are very diplomatic, Greg. How about that for diplomacy? Matt Eberflus commending the referees when the topic was how poorly they executed that.
No, actually, I'll tell you, there's not a thing that he says that I disagree with.
How about
and I'm not jumping on the bandwagon here. You know what he is? He's an old-fashioned ball coach. And you got to like that.
Mhm.
He's doing what he wants to do. He wants to coach football. And he's going to do it the way he wants to do it. And he tries to be as transparent or as honest as he can with the media, but still staying within the limits. In other words, he's not going to give out information he's not supposed to give out.
Mhm. All right, we need to talk about this defense. I was at the game, and it was one of the more frustrating experiences that I had. It just seemed like wide receivers for the Dolphins were always open in that intermediate area between the linebackers and the defensive backs. It's really hard to witness that, particularly after the loss of Roquan Smith. So I got to ask, did Roquan's departure make a difference in this game?
Well, it didn't make a big difference in the coverage aspect.
Okay.
Even though I think Roquan is a pretty good coverage linebacker.
Yeah.
Let's look at who they were playing against. Okay. Tyreek Hill is the fastest man in football.
Mm-hmm.
He's an excellent receiver. I can go back to the Bills Kansas City Chiefs playoff game, and the Bills score with 13 minutes left to go up by 2, I think. And there's only 13 seconds left in the game, and that little son of a bitch made 2 plays in that 13 seconds that got the Chiefs the victory. Going. I mean, he does it again. And Buffalo last year had the number 1 defense in the NFL, I think, or number 2. They were, up near the top.
Right.
And he does it against everybody. He's very fast. Both guys are very, very fast. So, and you got when you look at the Bears secondary, it's not that they're not talented; it's they're young. Your most experienced guy is Eddie Jackson, and then your most experienced corner is Jalen. He's only in his 3rd year. Vildor goes out early in the game with an injury, so now they have to take Kyler, who's been playing strictly the slot, put him outside when he's better off inside. And I think that loads up because they're really 2 separate positions. So now you got the kid, his head swimming a little bit. And trust me, I'm not making excuses. Just telling you, I know what goes on in these kids' mind when they're being asked to do a lot. So you get against some players like Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and the first thing you're thinking is, I can't get beat over the top. So you're naturally playing to protect against the deep ball, and at the same time, what does that do? That opens up underneath and gives these guys who are rare athletes the opportunity to make plays after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I've seen Tyreek Hill so many times over the years when he turns an 8 or 9 yard reception into a 60-yard reception.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like a bullet with it when he gets the ball in his hand. So, and the key to that was that really you can blame the secondary all you want, but to me the key was lack of pass rush. Because Tua had the time,
oh my goodness,
the opportunity to make the throws. He got pressured a few times, and I thought in the second half that Jones played a lot better, but they still weren't getting help from the outside. Okay, and who have you lost? Quinn. Well, people say, oh, Quinn only had 1 sack. Yeah, but Quinn was getting double teamed almost all the time. You look at the stat, how many times he got double teamed during the course of the year. He's the 4th most double team player in the league before that trade. And so that allowed other guys the freedom to win one-on-one battles and get the pressure or the sack. They don't have that right now. You got some young players that have an opportunity to become that, but they're not there now. So you got, I think 2 of the biggest needs going into next year, whether it's free agency or the draft, is one inside guy and one edge guy.
Thank you. I know fans are going to be upset because they want a top-notch wide receiver from this draft.
You know what? I don't think some of these guys are on one-year contracts, so they got to determine who they want to bring back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody said we got to use one of those high picks on a wide receiver. They did last week. The number 2, they just used the number 2 pick to draft a wide receiver last week. The deal has been done.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and he has made the wide receiver room that much better. There's some other guys, hey, they've been hurt. Pringle's been hurt. Okay, Valus hasn't stepped up. I think eventually he will, and then you're going to be happy. Do I think they will bring in another receiver? They might draft one. It's not going to be, I'll say it right now, it won't be on day 1 and it won't be on day 2. It'll be day 3. And you can get, the receiving class is so deep that you can get, just like last year, it's so deep that in the 4th or 5th round, you're going to get a hell of a football player that 10 years ago might have gone in the 2nd round. And part of it is because, you know, you studied the analytics of a draft and how many receivers go in the 1st, how many go in the 2nd, how many go in the 3rd, how many are off the board total through the first 3 rounds. Yep. And you take the average and you figure it out and you say, okay, I got 19 receivers with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round grades, and the average number, and I'm just throwing, you know, dart at the wall here. Right. You know, and I've got, and the average is 14 that come off the board. So that means when I get into the 4th round and I'm picking high in the 4th round, I'm going to get a guy that, you know, rated as a 3rd rounder, maybe a 2nd rounder on my board that can step in and play. That's just the way that I did when I was with the Bears. We did this with every single position. You know exactly where you could get guys because of the averages and how things came off in previous drafts.
Yep. It's a very, very good point. I totally expect that the biggest need is edge and 3 tech, and not in that order.
And I don't even, and I'll be honest with you, I like Jones better now than I did at the beginning of the year.
Okay. He's
starting to come along, but would he be better off at the other position and make that even better?
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the one technique. Somebody says here, draft needs corner. I don't think they need any corners.
I agree.
They need those corners to mature.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I said before. You want them to be finished products. There's been 3 or 4 rookies that have played extensively in the secondary this year. Well, you got to expect them to play like rookies. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to get you beat. The important thing is they're learning how to play.
Homer Cuts, even before the show began, posted this. Ogunjobi is playing. What's up with that medical call? What are your thoughts on the fact that Ogunjobi, who has been playing fairly well for the Pittsburgh Steelers,
well, he did get hurt. Now he hurt his back or something.
Right.
Do I know the people who made the call on that? Yes, I do. Do I know the answer? No, but I know it was a Liz Frank thing that probably was in that gray area where, you know, the contract was a 3-year, $40 million deal. You know, it wasn't a couple pennies. And at 3 years, $40 million, the dude better be right.
Right.
And so, and if the doctors say, hey, this guy he's not going to make it 2 years, you know, and that's what happens. Sometimes you're not just looking at this year, because I've sat in those meetings and with these same doctors. And, you know, I'll give you an example. I won't use names, but we get to a player, and I remember there's a linebacker. And there was some questions about his medical. And there's 2 different orthopedics in the room. I'm not going to mention their names. But, you know, Jerry goes, Well, how bad is it? And the doctor, first thing the doctor goes is, how good is he? and Jerry says, he could go in the first or second round. He goes, well, doctor, it comes back. He goes, well, I don't know what first or second round means contractually, but, give me an example. He goes, he won't make it out of his first contract. He said, Jerry says like 4 or 5 year deal. And he said, he won't make it out of his first contract.
That's a great.
And so, okay. So now you're wasting money.
Exactly.
Okay. Could he be real good for 2 years? Maybe. But that thing's going to wear. And then you set in, let's say you get into a knee situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing they hate is arthritic conditions. Okay, you've had a previous surgery, maybe 2 surgeries, and you're good. On tape, you look great. But now you do the MRI, and you see there's these arthritic conditions in the player's knee. And the one thing, there's no cure for arthritis. Okay. It never gets any better. It only gets worse. So they tell you, okay, you're going to get 2 years out of him, 2.5 years out of him. Then he's going to start missing a lot of practice. Then he's going to not practice at all. And you're going to get into a situation. And now you can go, okay, who's a player like that from the last couple of years that practice sometimes once a week or not at all during the week? Khalil Mack.
There you go.
Because of injuries. Now, you figure into that how much money you're paying this guy. And remember what I've always said. If you're paying a guy $20 million, you got to get $20 million back in production. And, so these are complicated things. So, you can sit and say, well, Ogunjobi's playing good. Well, Ogunjobi had like 7 or 8 sacks last year. I think he's got 1 or 1.5 this year. So don't tell me he might be stopping the run, but the Bears wanted him to be an interior pass rusher as a 3 technique.
Todd Gurley is a good example of that, right? According to Mike Gibson.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I don't know what Gurley. I know he had that serious injury when he was at Georgia, and I don't remember what his medical was, but hey, I know I've gone into those medical meetings and we've had players we loved on tape that we've had to take off the board because they didn't pass the medical. And some of them played in the league, but most of them, I'm going to say 85 to 90% of the time, the doctors were right. And that, yeah, you got a couple good years out of them. Then all of a sudden they fall off a cliff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's to me the aggravating thing is that I wish these physicals could be done before there's even any announcement that there has been an agreement to a contract and so forth, because it's just so disappointing when something like that falls through. And even Ryan Poles himself said that they probably missed out on a player or two they would have gone after. Because they were waiting results on the physical. So something should be done to help expedite that or the timing of that.
Well, you know what? And I may be wrong on my timetable on this, but you go back and you look, I think they came to an agreement with Ogunjobi the first or second day of the negotiating period.
That's how I recall it. Yeah.
And not actual free agency, where you can start negotiating on Sunday at noon and free agency doesn't open up until Wednesday at noon type thing. So you make a deal on Sunday or Monday and you announce, that comes out, and then it's not until the opening day of free agency that it can actually have the medical. So you think you got a player and you've wasted 2 days. Mm-hmm. Now, when they did, in fairness to the Bears, when it did come out that he failed the physical, they had Jones signed within 12 hours. And Jones was actually getting on a plane at the airport, getting on a plane to go from San Diego to the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
and they talked him into coming here because they thought it was a better opportunity.
I got some great questions I want to make sure we get to because I know you've got an appointment this afternoon. So first of all, Dented Fender asks, how did Jack Sanborn do in his debut at the linebacker position against the Dolphins on Sunday?
I haven't reviewed the game to answer that question. I know he had 6 or 7 tackles, something like that, which is good. But there was a lot of plays just looking at the game the initial time where that middle of that field was wide open. And so, you know, you had 2 new players in there. You moved the one guy over to the will spot. And then so really you compensated for losing one player by having 2 new players at new positions.
Right.
And so it's like anything else, that's going to take time. Somebody said short arms is a liability for backer. Not anywhere near the liability it is for a tackle or a defensive end. You can get by at guard with shorter arms. You can get by at interior offensive line, defensive tackle, nose tackle. You can get by with shorter arms. I mean, you can't have alligator arms, but you know, you can get by. But defensive end, offensive tackle, you have to have long arms. You know, and it brings up a good point because people around here are going to be crying for the Bears to draft Skoronski from Northwestern come spring. He's probably going to be a guard because everybody who's been in there that I've talked to said he isn't going to be tall enough and his arms are going to be too short to play outside.
But he's got
not taken away from the kind of player he is.
Sure.
The guy, he's a great player, but unless something magical happens between now and he can't go to an all-star game because he's a junior, so he can't. So you're not going to get those measurements until the combine. And
are there ever any exceptions for those all-star games for juniors? Because
they got I think if you're a 4th-year player and you still have eligibility and you're going to graduate in December.
Okay.
And so, but that's about it. I'm not 100%. They keep changing the rules. I don't think a junior who's going to graduate in 3 years, and actually 2.5 years, he'd have to graduate in December of his 3rd year. He is not eligible to play in an all-star game. Now, the rules are far outdated. You know, when they came into effect, you know, there was 25 or 30 underclassmen entering the draft. Then it went to 35. Well, now it's 125. And I think you're penalizing those players from having that extra access to professional evaluators. You know, part of it's the interview process. What happens is you got so many seniors at the various all-star games that you knock out all the interviews with the seniors at the all-star games, and then you're interviewing mostly underclassmen at the combine.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, next question I got here is, I got to tell you, I went to the game with Dan Aguirre and a few other people. Bears Country Podcast is Mr. Shorty, and Dan is one of those guys who is the whiny podcaster that the lady I met doesn't want to listen to. Because Dan is saying, we got to fire Alan Williams. We got to, and I'm like, Dan, just calm down. But Mike Henneman asked the question, what advice would you give to Bears defensive coordinator Alan Williams? He likes to spot the other team 4 touchdowns to start the game.
Yeah, before the Dallas game, defense was playing pretty damn good football.
Yep. One of the best second half defenses in pro football.
Okay. Now you took away their premier pass rusher, and I don't give a damn if he only had 1 sack. He was getting pressures and he was getting double teamed all the time. And so it was a player that had to be accounted for by the offense, just by his mere presence on the field. And then the following week, you take away a linebacker who was the leading tackler of the league, who, by the way, played pretty good last night. after only having 3 days of practice with a Baltimore team in an entirely different scheme. And he only played part-time because he was new. So you've got arguably your two best players in your front seven are gone. And it's not Alan Williams' fault. They don't have enough quality talent yet. Mm-hmm. Some of it may develop. They're young guys. Some of them may develop into quality guys, but they're not there yet. And when you take away two of the best, everybody wanted some offense and everybody wanted draft choices. Well, they got you draft choices and they got you one more offense, a big play offensive player. So you had to give up something to do that. Right. So you can't expect the defense to still play at that level. I tell you right, if the Bears want to win, they're going to have to score 35 a game because they're giving up 28.
Right.
And it's just the fact of life right now.
Yeah. I mean, we all have to realistically, I think even before you start thinking about the position coaches and grading them and the defensive coordinators, you've got to look at the talent level on this team. And you got to look at all of the dynamics surrounding this team. As Greg just mentioned, you trade away players, you're making all these changes. You still got guys learning the system. You've basically, gaffer tape, duct taped this defense together. And so again, to make these harsh judgments about firing people, like my good buddy Dan Aguirre says, I think it's just totally out of line. You got to be patient on this. So here's the next question. Adeptus asks, Greg, how realistic is it for Ryan Poles to be able to dedicate maybe $40 million average per year to the defensive line in 2023? There's got to be some resources put into the defensive line with over about approximately $120 million available right now in cap space. Do you see the team dedicating about $40 million per year into this defensive line?
It's a good question. I don't know if my quick answer would be yes, you can do that. But you got to be very careful when you're doing this. You're not just thinking, okay, I've got all this money in my pocket, so I get to spend it all now. Well, don't forget, down the road, there's people that you want to extend on this team that you're going to have to pay. Biggest being the quarterback. Mm-hmm. What do you think? This is, at the end of next year, if you want to extend Justin Fields again, you can't do it in the earliest you can do it is January of 2024. So, but if the arrow's still going up with him, what the hell do you think it's going to cost? And I'm going to tell you the contract you're going to look at because he doesn't have it yet, and that's Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And he's gambling on himself right now. So, but could you? Yeah, and it's tricky. You say 40 million average. Well, yeah, you can use that, but you got to figure in voidable years. There's so many different ways they can write contracts. The one player I'm really like to say, there's three defensive linemen that could be in free agency next year that I'd take any of them. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's Deron Payne from Washington, and Washington's already got a bunch of capital on their defensive line that they've spent. They've already paid Allen, and they have Young, who was the first pick in the draft a couple of years, that they're going to have to pay. So are they going to be able to put the tag on Deron Payne? So make the answer simple. I'm going to say, yeah, you can do it. You got to do it wisely. You got to get good football players and under fair contracts, and that's the key. It's a fair contract that's good for the team and good for the player, and you can do it. I mean, my personal opinion is you got to have three things taken care of and then fill in the rest: the quarterback, the offensive line, the defensive line. And yes, I'm old school, but you know what? You got those areas taken care of, you got a chance in every game.
This question here is funny. Do we need robot refereeing? What do you think, Greg? But let me expand on this question, because this is something that I've been harping on. Everyone in the nation who saw that game saw that it was pass interference on Chase Claypool because they saw the replay, because most people saw it real time. The announcers, both Kevin Harlan and the color announcer whose name I'm forgetting.
Trent.
Yes, Trent King. They immediately called a penalty on that. But nonetheless, everyone else, because of the benefit of the replay, knew absolutely that it was defensive pass interference. And yet the people who are most responsible, only responsible for making that call, don't have the benefit of that replay. So how much should this replay be available to the officiating to improve the quality of officiating?
It's a great question, but I think, let's say you put it to the competition committee, because the competition committee is the people that make these changes.
Okay.
Okay. What you're going to have is, okay, let's say they opened it up and say, you can challenge 3 calls or 3 non-calls in the course of a game. Okay. You've just added 6 more timeouts, so to speak, to the length of a game. They aren't doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're going to keep going back to when the game's over. Those officials are going to get graded just like the players are evaluated. And how about this? And I'm sure you know this, but just in case you don't, when you get into the playoffs, the referee crews aren't they got crews that stay together throughout the whole season.
Yes.
You got all-star crews in the playoffs, and it's all based on what they graded out during the year. And so if this guy who made the non-calls, he's going to get downgraded for those.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that could cost him a playoff game, which means, or a couple playoff games, which means that's a couple checks he's not getting.
Yeah. Eric says that, these 6 more timeouts, while the NFL would get 6 more commercial breaks, and that means more money. But the time allocated for these games is also very, very important to the networks, because they don't want to lap over into primetime television. So it's a little bit more complicated.
Here's what would happen. You'd have to take a game time, using Eastern time. You couldn't start a game, the second game, until 4:30. Right. Eastern time. So it'll be 3:30 here. So there's your half hour. And now you got to run till at least 7 o'clock, which is just at the start of primetime TV on your second game. And that doesn't include Sunday Night Football. I just don't see them doing it. And I think more timeouts and less football because of the timeouts is going to be a detriment to the game, not a help to the game.
I agree.
You know what? There's always going to be mistakes.
Right.
Okay. Replay has helped fix some. You're never going to fix all. But it's the human element that I think you got to live with it. We can bitch all we want. Did it cost us a game? Maybe cost us a game. You can't say definitely, because you don't know what will happen.
Sure.
But it like I tweeted on Sunday, it cost the Bears the opportunity to have a chance to either tie or win the game.
Homer Cut says, just cut out the national anthem. Come on, Homer. Today's voting day. I think we know where he's voting, right, Greg? All right. More questions here from our great folks over in the chat room. King Bookie Nation wants to know, have you heard any word on who is going to take over Ted Phillips's job?
No, I think during the interview state,
Mm-hmm.
going through interviews, and they're not going to publicize. It's not like you're going to get a tweet from Bears Communications saying we interviewed Aldo Gandia for the president's job today.
It failed miserably.
Yeah, it's they're not going to put it on. No one you're going to find out. So and so has been hired by the Chicago Bears as president.
There you go. All right. Let me get back to a Bears question here. Oh, Eric has got a good one. He says, yes, ask Greg why he hates punters and left Trenton Gill off his article on WCG about the rookie class.
Yeah, no, I don't hate punters, and you're right. What I said what did I say back in August about him?
Oh, you were praising him very much.
No, but there was one thing I said.
That's taking 3 steps when he punts.
He's a 3-step punter. He's going to get one blocked. Somebody's going to figure it out.
Yes, has he had?
You watch from where he catches the ball to where he kicks the ball.
Yep.
I've been saying all along, they're going to see it, they're going to rush him, and they're going to get a block.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're very right. All right. Robert Lee says the Bears are the only losing team from Sunday that Monday Night Football had halftime highlights. So he's just praising the Bears there. Thank you very much for that, Robert. And then Chris Watts.
What's funny? What's funny is that I don't listen to sports talk radio that much anymore, but I had to run some errands yesterday afternoon, and so I'm in the car and I'm listening to Parkins and Spiegel, and usually those guys are always ripping everything. Yeah. They were like, the Bears won by 40 because of one thing and one thing only: the quarterback played good.
Yeah. Well, I think that I know I listened to those guys when Justin Fields was first acquired and he had his first games, and they were very, very high on Justin. And then all of a sudden they started questioning Justin, and now they're back on the bandwagon. So,
well, I'm going to tell you right now, and I don't care if he doesn't like it, the guy who knows nothing about football is Danny Parkins. That is the most clueless MF I've ever seen. Knows nothing.
I'll send him that clip and see if he wants to come on the show and debate you or something like that. Oh. Chris Watts is asking, are we seeing the end of the reign of the Green Bay Packers?
Yes, without question.
I love it.
It's funny because I had a text conversation with a Green Bay journalist. This was it Sunday night or Monday night? I think it might have been Sunday night, because it was during the Sunday night game, and I said, doesn't even look like he wants to be out there playing, meaning Aaron Rodgers, and it's looked like that for weeks.
Yes, it has.
And he said the same thing, and it started because we've talked about it, weeks before. He refuses to take the blame himself. He passes it on to everybody else. The team has stunk, but you know what? They put themselves in that own situation because they gave the spoiled brat that huge contract, and they didn't have to do that.
Yep.
And they're saddled with them. Even if they cut, they're just. Personally, I don't think he's going to be around after this year. He may have to be, but he doesn't want to be. I think he's checked out. I don't think he likes playing football anymore.
I totally agree with you. We saw signs of that over the last couple of seasons, but I really also think, Greg, that this ayahuasca stuff that he's taken, I've done some research on that stuff. That can really, really change your body chemicals and your body chemistry. And so he may not have that competitive spirit because he's ingested these hallucinogenics into his body. This is not what professional athletes should be putting into their bodies, especially somebody as his age. And with all of the challenges that he had, remember, he didn't show up for OTAs. So he chose not to build a relationship with the players he was throwing under the bus a week ago. This guy is an embarrassment to the Green Bay myth. an embarrassment to the fans. We're even seeing idiots like Peter Bukowski, the podcaster who's always talking crap about Chicago Bears fans. We're even seeing guys like that turn against Aaron Rodgers. And so
I got to tell you something about Peter. Peter, because I know Peter.
Okay.
And he's not a bad guy in real life, but he loves tormenting Bears fans.
Oh my goodness.
Because he knows they get pissed off. But in reality, you talk to him a lot, he's really a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but he, like I say, he knows he can get away with it. He knows he can catch your ire. So why not? You know what? I do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's for fun. It's not
Absolutely.
none of it's serious. It's just for fun. But and where you were going with Rodgers on the drugs, I don't know anything about that stuff. I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent for him. All I know is that, and I said to this guy that's having the text conversation, I said, where I first noticed it and never noticed it before was back in June. He was in the match with Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Tom Brady. He was like out in left field compared to the other three.
Yes.
He was being non-communicative. Yeah, he sunk the putt to win the match. Big freaking deal.
Yeah.
But, he just was like distancing himself and seemed sort of sullen during the whole 12-hole match versus, that quarterback camaraderie, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that because just something's off. Then he usually plays in that tournament out in Reno.
Yes.
Didn't go this year. So it's like he's an entirely different person than he was even a year ago.
I had a question here that I accidentally lost, and I wanted to. I'm scrolling to see if I can find it, but let me paraphrase it. And I apologize for the person who wrote it. They asked, and I got to admit that this thought ran through my head too when we were talking about Ballard at the beginning of the show. So if the Colts choose to start rebuilding and move some assets, to acquire higher draft picks and more draft picks and so forth, is there one particular player on that Colts team that you think that right now, yeah, he would be an ideal person for the Bears to acquire either via free agency or trade or something like that? Did anybody come to mind?
Well, the ideal guy would be the three, Buckner.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and he's still got 2 years left on his contract.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think, you'd have to dig up his contract. I don't think after this year, the way the guarantees were paid out, there's no more guarantees. So you're just picking up the salary and not. So they could actually, pick up the cap space, not get a cap hit for getting him. But in saying that, he's the glue. He and the linebacker are the glue. The linebacker's been hurt. I think he's played one or two games all year, if that. Those two guys are the glue of the defense. And unless you want to do what Ryan Poles did and totally gut the team,
right?
And I can't see.
Thursday.
I'm not going to say it's impossible that he won't do it, but I can't see him doing it. Buckner's going to be making, I think, $18 million next year. Mm-hmm. For the tight, he's 28 years old for that player. Mm-hmm. That ain't all bad. Mm-hmm. So why would you let him go? See, here's the thing, and I said this yesterday because people started right after Wright got fired. Oh, fire sale in Indianapolis. Buckner's going to be available. I go, yeah, just like there was a fire sale in Indianapolis or in Carolina, and DJ Moore was going to be available.
That's right.
Carolina got rid of two players. One was a malcontent, Anderson, the receiver, total a-hole. The other guy was a running back who is, for all intents and purposes, he's overpaid and he's always hurt.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, and we got a tradable asset. We got a guy that we can get a lot back for because of his talent level, but we don't see him in the future. Mm-hmm. Okay, where DJ Moore was just extended. If it wasn't this past spring, it was the spring before. And so they weren't getting rid of him.
Mm.
You know, you got to look at these things. You know, people look at these things that they don't think at the circumstances, and you got to look at the contract. You know, and you know, who did the extension? Those types of things. And you know, I think Scott Fitterer was the guy who did the extension with DJ Moore. Well, he's still the GM there.
It's fascinating stuff. Let me try to squeeze two more in here before we get you out of here and run your errands. Pepe Silvia asks, what's Greg's opinion on Will Anderson from Bama, and how does he stack up to some of the elite pass rushers we've seen in the league right now?
Yeah, Anderson is arguably the best edge in this year's draft. If he comes out, he's pretty darn good. He's a little bit undersized. They got him listed, I think, at 245. He might be bigger than that. And he's going to be a very good pass rusher in this league. I think unless the Bears are, some people got him as the number one player, but there's some decent quarterbacks in this class, and quarterbacks have a way of finding their way to the top because the teams that need them are going to find a way to get them, to make sure they get them. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm going to say you're going to have a top 5 pick to even have a remote chance. And that's probably too low. And that includes 2 players, him and Carter from Georgia, the defensive tackle. And Carter has not played much this year, but he played the other day against Tennessee and just dominated. You know, so, but those are probably the 2 best defensive linemen in this draft. They're pretty good. You know, Bracey from Clemson, he's missed time because his younger sister died from cancer. I don't know if he's a real good fit for this scheme. Could he play the nose or the one technique? Yeah, that without question. I'm not sure if he's a guy that you could slide over into the 3. You know, you gotta be disruptive. You gotta find the right guy. That's why I say there's 3 guys. There's Payne. There's a kid from Hargrove from the Eagles. But the only problem with Hargrove from the Eagles is that he's going to be 30 years old next year. So how much do you want to pay him? And he's already making a ton of money. And then there's the guy, and I can't think of his name offhand right now, for Denver, who's coming out of contract, who is a Ohio State kid and you know, a perfect 3 technique type player. Those are, you know, you get any one of those 3, and all 3 of them could be franchised, but we're not going to know that until, you know, February or March.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I think I got one more. Sam Rush wanted to know about Chase Claypool. He says Getsy was the wide receiver coach that helped develop Devontae Adams into a top 5 wide receiver. I don't know if that's quite true, because Getsy was basically with the quarterback's coach. So
no, he started off as a wide receiver coach there.
Oh, I did not know that. My apologies.
He was a wide receiver coach. Then he went to Mississippi State as the offensive coordinator.
Okay.
Then he came back from Mississippi State as the quarterback coach. He was only at Mississippi State 1 year.
Yeah. So what do you think about Claypool being developed by Getsy? And what do you think Claypool's ceiling is?
Oh, I think his ceiling is Pro Bowl level.
Oh.
You know, I mean, I've loved this guy going back, you know, to college. Very raw. I mean, he's from up in that Vancouver, British Columbia area. Played Canadian high school football. So, and it took him a couple of years to get going. He's at Notre Dame 4 years. He played a lot on special teams and a little bit in the offense his first 2 years, and really took off his last 2 years. And you know, when you look at the athletic numbers, he's got a 40-inch vertical jump at 238 pounds. He ran 4.42. He's just extremely fluid and athletic. He's strong. I tweeted this last week. The Bears might have the strongest weight room strength-wise.
I saw that, yeah.
Core in the league. When you look, Harry did 27 reps. Shit, there's linemen in the league that don't do 27 reps coming out. Claypool did 19. EQ did 20.
It's amazing.
And Pringle, I think, did 15.
I love those guys.
And most of them are like, Mooney did 11, 12, 13, something like that. I mean, they're strong for their size. They're little guys, but they're not, those other guys, EQ, Claypool, those are like linebacker and lineman numbers.
Greg, before we started the show, you said that the Bears were going to win Sunday against the Detroit Lions. Put it on record here. Put it on videotape so that I can share it with the world. Why are the Bears going to beat the Lions?
They're a better football team.
Plain and simple. Enough said.
They won in the Dome against Green Bay. Green Bay they're going down the tubes.
Yeah, it seems that way.
People at Detroit beat Green Bay. That tells you how bad Green Bay is. And Green Bay lost their best pass rusher.
That's right.
In the game. Gary's out for the year now.
He is. So let's look at this schedule. Week 10 Lions, week 11 Falcons, week 12 Jets, and week 13 Packers before that bye. So of those 4 games, I would think a 3-1 record would be.
Is the Jets game in New York?
It is in New York, along with the Atlanta Falcons. Yes.
Yeah, that's they just beat Buffalo, but I mean Buffalo just had an off day. They're playing pretty good, and know it's going to be interesting. You got the number 2 and number 3 quarterbacks. No, the number 2 and the number 4 quarterbacks taken in that draft 2 years ago, and so it's going to be fun. Fields. I'm throwing a dart at the wall here, but Fields may have a little chip on his shoulder on that one. I should have gone too.
Yes, I think it's in his mind. His press conference after Sunday's game was so special. I mean, he sat there with this kind of sense of satisfaction, like, I knew it was coming, guys. You guys were doubting me. You guys were questioning the coaches about, my progress. And perhaps I'm reading too much into it, but it was great to see him being vindicated and getting.
Well, it's going to continue to get better. Part of it's going to be Claypool and Harry are going to be integrated more into the offense. So you've got more weapons from that standpoint. Hopefully Velas will become a part of that, and just the speed factor alone. And the running game's already strong,
right?
And I gotta give one guy some props, because the last 2 weeks he's played pretty good. The guy has been getting buried more than anybody else on this team, and that's Mustafa.
Yay, my man Sam! I pull for this guy.
He's meant. Flus said it like last week. He goes, "There's nobody tougher," and I mean, this guy was dead and buried, according to the fans, 3 weeks ago. They're so happy that the other guy's going in and played the center position. Patrick's gone in and played the center position. He gets hurt after a quarter. Mustafa's got to go back in, and then the next 2 weeks against Dallas and last week against Miami, you know what? It's probably the best 2 games he's played as a Bear. He's played a lot better. Now, is he the answer? No. I'm just saying that, he's mentally tough, and you got to give him credit for that.
Indeed. Perfect way to end the show with compliments to my man, Sam Mustafa. I always love these Chicago Bears players who get picked on by fans. I think, sometimes the criticism is deserved. But
I got to say this,
please,
because my good friend's going through it down in Indy now.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. Fans think these people are fair game. But you know what? And they are, because of the position they're in. But at the same time, they're human beings, and they got feelings, and they got families. Okay, so Sam may have a girlfriend. I don't even know if he's married. Maybe he's got a wife. Maybe he's got some kids. You know, Chris has got 5 kids. He's got a wife. Okay, so your kids, now his son's a pretty damn good quarterback. He's a senior in high school and being recruited. He's got to go into school every day and listen to that shit.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, when these people mouth off and they scream and holler and they say, well, that's their right. And that is. They can say what they want. But just remember, you never have to, meaning they never have to face that kind of public scrutiny. Yet they're free to give it to these people, and they don't think about who else it affects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The woman that I referenced at the top of the show who gave us props because we don't whine around here, I think that is another reason why she loves this podcast, Greg, because of what you just said. You keep an eye on the human element of this. And by the way, I want to apologize to that lady because I asked her name, but with my awful memory, I don't recall it, and I don't want to.
You're younger than me, and I'm supposed to be getting senile, and you are.
See,
I mean, what?
I smoked a lot of marijuana in my teens, Greg. I think that affected my memory. I think that.
Well, wait a minute. If that's the case, then it should still be illegal. I mean, we could have we could if it's because they're saying there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, well,
that's why it's legalized. So you know, and if you're saying that, then maybe they made a mistake.
Ravi may be the foremost expert on memory loss in marijuana, and he says same here. He forgets to do his homework sometimes because of that. All right, Greg. Again, absolutely great show. It is so good. And by the way, you and I are planning a Monday show next week because you've got
hopefully, yeah.
And so it'll be exciting to talk about the pounding the Bears are going to give the Detroit Lions next week with you. And so we'll be in touch throughout the week, brother.
Okay, buddy.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Later. See you later.